The rain fell hard over the alien market, turning the dirt into black mud. Flickering lights from rusted poles cast weak shadows over cages made of steel and bone. Strange smells filled the air: wet fur, burnt oil, and the sharp scent of fear. Merchants shouted, showing off creatures from across the galaxy, but one cage in the corner was different. Inside sat a thin alien girl with silver eyes, her legs pulled close to her chest. Her hair was tangled, her skin pale under the grime. And her right leg was bent in a way that looked painful. The seller, a tall creature with green scales, slapped the bars and shouted to the crowd, "This one is cheap. Broken merchandise. Not worth much, but maybe useful as a servant." The crowd laughed, some throwing small stones at her cage. "She can't even walk straight." One alien barked, "She looks half dead already." Another jeered. The girl kept her head down, but her silver eyes flickered for a moment. A spark of something, a memory of pride. The seller grew impatient, waving his claws. "No one wants her." "Fine, I'll dump her in the wastelands by nightfall. She won't last an hour out there." A hush fell over the crowd for a moment, not out of pity, but out of the thrill of cruelty. The girl's hands tightened around her knees, and she tried not to show fear from the shadows at the edge of the market. A human stepped forward. He wore a weathered coat, boots covered in dust, and carried no visible weapons. His face was calm, but his eyes watched everything carefully. The seller sneered, "You human, you want to bid. This is no prize worth taking." The man looked at the girl, his gaze steady. "I'll take her," he said quietly. The seller blinked, then laughed. "You serious? You must like wasting money." The human pulled out a small pouch of coins, tossing it onto the table. "Done," he said. "Open the cage." The crowd murmured, confused and curious. No one wanted her. Why would a human risk buying something useless? Some whispered that maybe he wanted cheap labor. Others thought he was just mad. The seller unlocked the cage with a rusty key and stepped back. The girl didn't move. Her eyes narrowed. She had seen tricks before, promises of freedom that led to worse chains. The human crouched near the cage door, speaking softly, "You can walk, or I can carry you. Your choice." She studied him for a long moment, then slowly stood, limping heavily on her bad leg. He didn't rush her, just waited when she stepped out into the rain. The cold hit her thin frame, and she shivered. The human removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She flinched at the sudden touch, but didn't pull away. "Come on," he said, leading her away from the market. The crowd watched them go, muttering and shaking their heads. The seller counted his coins. Smirking, glad to be rid of her, they walked through narrow streets lit by dim lamps. The rain still falling, she kept her distance, limping beside him, her mind racing. With questions, finally, she asked, her voice hoarse from days without water. "Why did you buy me?" He glanced at her, but didn't answer right away, because no one else would. He finally said. It wasn't the answer she expected. Usually, people had reasons, selfish ones, cruel ones, but this man gave nothing away. She decided not to trust him. Not yet. Still, the warmth of his coat kept her from shaking, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel completely invisible as they reached the edge of the market district. The girl glanced back. The cages were still there, the voices of the merchants still shouting. But her cage was empty now. Something in her chest shifted. Not hope exactly, but a strange feeling she couldn't name. The human walked ahead, his pace steady, never looking back. She followed, limping, unsure if she was heading to freedom or another prison. The rain kept falling, washing away the mud, but not the scars she carried inside. The rain had slowed by the time they reached the outer streets. The market noise faded behind them, replaced by the quiet hum of the city's sleeping districts. The human led the alien girl through narrow alleys until they stopped before a small metal door. Half hidden behind stacks of old crates, he pressed a button, and the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit room inside. It wasn't much: a single table, 2 chairs, and a small heating unit glowing faintly in the corner. Still, it was warmer and safer than the cold streets outside. The human stepped aside, motioning her in. She hesitated at the doorway, her bare feet dripping rainwater onto the metal floor. Her eyes darted around, searching for hidden chains, weapons, or others waiting inside. Seeing nothing, she slowly stepped in. The human closed the door and walked over to the table, dropping a small bag onto it. From the bag, he pulled out a loaf of bread, a jar of clear water, and a folded blanket. He placed them in front of her without a word. Her stomach twisted painfully. At the smell of the bread, it had been days since she had eaten anything more than scraps. But she didn't reach for it. She had learned long ago that kindness often came with a hidden trap. Instead, she narrowed her eyes and asked, her voice still rough, "What do you want from me?" The man looked at her for a moment, then shrugged. "To see you eat," he said simply. She frowned, unsure if he was mocking her. When he didn't add anything, she took a slow, cautious bite of the bread. The taste made her eyes sting, not from flavor, but from the sudden reminder of what real food felt like. The human poured her a cup of water and pushed it toward her. She stared at the clear liquid for a moment before drinking it in slow sips. He didn't speak, didn't rush her. When she finished, she placed the cup down and sat back, still watching him carefully. After a moment, he crouched down beside her and glanced at her injured leg. It was swollen and bruised, the skin torn in places from old wounds. "May I?" he asked, pointing at it. She almost refused, but the throbbing pain was too much. She gave a slight nod, ready to pull away at the first sign of harm. He took a small kit from a drawer and began cleaning the wounds. His hands were steady and gentle, the movements practiced. When she winced, he slowed down, murmuring, "Almost done." No one had ever treated her injuries like this before. Usually, they were ignored or made worse. The warmth of the heating unit and the strange calm in his voice made her eyelids heavy as he wrapped the leg in clean bandages. She asked again, softer this time, "Why did you buy me?" He didn't look up, because leaving you there would have been wrong, he said. It wasn't a grand answer, but something in his tone felt real. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. When he finished, he handed her the folded blanket. "Rest," he said, pointing to a small bed in the corner. She stared at it for a moment. She hadn't slept in a real bed in years. Slowly, she lay down, wrapping the blanket around herself. Her eyes stayed open for a long time, tracking every movement he made. The human sat at the table, cleaning a small metal device that looked like a tool rather than a weapon. He hummed a low tune under his breath, not paying her much attention. It felt strange. Most people stared at her, judged her, tried to control her. But he seemed to treat her like she was just there, a person. Her thoughts kept circling back to the market, the crowd's laughter, the seller's voice calling her broken. This human Elias. She overheard someone call him once outside. Didn't seem to believe that. But what if he was lying? What if he had a plan she couldn't see yet? The warmth of the blanket and the ache in her body finally pulled her towards sleep. As her breathing slowed, she heard him quietly say to himself, "She'd be all right." She wanted to believe him, but her mind whispered caution. For now, she would rest, but trust. Trust would take much longer. The next morning, the city streets were still damp from the rain. Elias moved quickly, packing a small bag with food, water, and a few tools. Kelra watched from the bed. The blanket still wrapped tightly around her. Her leg ached less after his care, but she still limped when she stood. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice low. Somewhere safer, Elias replied. Slipping the bag over his shoulder, she narrowed her eyes. There is no safe place. Then we'll make one, he said, without looking back. They left the small room through the same hidden door. The air outside was colder, the streets quieter. Elias led her through back alleys and side roads, avoiding the main market. Kelra noticed how he kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting trouble. It didn't take long for her to see why. A pair of shadowy figures followed them at a distance. Their movements were too deliberate to be casual. Kelra's stomach tightened. They're slavers. She whispered, I know, Elias said calmly. Keep moving. They walked faster. Weaving through the narrow paths between crumbling buildings, the sound of footsteps behind them grew louder. Elias suddenly turned down a side street, pulling her with him. They ducked into an abandoned warehouse, the smell of rust and old oil thick in the air. He pressed a finger to his lips, telling her to stay quiet through a crack in the wall. They watched the two figures pass by outside. Kelra's hands trembled. She had been hunted before, and it had never ended well. Her mind screamed that she should run, hide, disappear, but something made her stay close to Elias. When the danger seemed to pass, they slipped out the back. And continued. The city walls soon loomed ahead, tall and lined with faded warning signs. Beyond them lay the open road and whatever waited outside at the gates. A bored alien guard glanced at them but didn't stop them. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe he thought they weren't worth the trouble. Once outside, the noise of the city was replaced by the whisper of the wind. A long dirt path stretched ahead, leading toward distant hills. The sun broke through the clouds, warming the wet ground. Kelra's limp slowed them, but Elias didn't complain. Instead, he adjusted his pace to match hers. After a while, she spoke, her voice uncertain. You? No, they'll come after you for taking me. He glanced at her. Let them try. Her brow furrowed. You don't understand. They don't stop. Elias gave a faint smile. Neither do I. They walked until the sky began to darken. Elias found a small, sheltered spot beneath a rocky overhang. He started a small fire and handed her some bread. She ate in silence, the flames reflecting in her silver eyes for the first time. She noticed he wasn't carrying any weapons. You're unarmed, she said. That's stupid. He chuckled softly. I'm not unarmed. I'm prepared. Later that night, as she sat close to the fire, Kelra's gaze drifted toward the shadows beyond the rocks. She thought she saw movement. Her eyes glowed faintly, an instinctive reaction she couldn't control. A pulse of soft energy rippled around her for a second before fading. Elias noticed, his eyes narrowing slightly. That's not normal, he said quietly. She quickly looked away. I told you, I'm broken. But he didn't believe her. In that brief moment, he had seen something powerful, something rare. He didn't press her about it, not yet. Instead, he handed her his coat again and said, Get some rest, we've got a long way ahead, as she lay down. Kelra couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was closing in. Somewhere behind them, the slavers were still following. And somewhere deeper inside her, the power she tried to bury was starting to wake up. Whether she liked it or not, the road ahead would not just be dangerous, it would change everything. The fire burned low in the shelter, casting long shadows on the stone walls. Kelra sat with her back to the rock, knees drawn to her chest, her silver eyes fixed on the flames. Elias sat across from her, repairing a torn strap from his bag, his hand steady, his face calm. But his mind was turning. The strange energy she had released earlier still lingered in his thoughts. After a long silence, Elias spoke. That light, from your eyes, what was it? Kelra froze, her fingers tightening around the blanket. Nothing, she said quickly. Just a trick of the fire. He shook his head. No. I've seen firelight before. That was something else. Her jaw clenched, the old habit of hiding her truth rising again. "You wouldn't understand," she muttered. "Try me," Elias replied. Leaning back against the wall, his tone calm but firm. Kelra's gaze shifted to the darkness beyond the shelter. For a long time, she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was low and slow, as if pulling each word from a locked place. "Inside her, I was born in a small colony, far from the trade worlds," she began. "My people. We were different. Some of us carried a gift, an energy in our blood. In our bones," she paused, her eyes reflecting both pride and pain. "We were taught to hide it because it scared others, but the rulers found out." Her voice cracked slightly. "They came with ships, soldiers. They took everyone with the gift." Elias listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving hers. "They brought us to the capital, kept us in cages, studied us when I was 12. They decided I was dangerous. They broke my leg so I could never run fast. They kept me starved so the power would fade." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling now. "They called me broken, unfit, worthless. And after years, they sold me like scrap." Her eyes lifted to his, searching for any sign of disgust or pity. But Elias's expression was steady, his voice quiet. "They didn't break you. They feared you." Kelra's breath caught. No one had ever said that before. For a moment, she didn't know if she wanted to believe it. "They feared what I might become," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The crackle of the fire filled the silence between them. Elias finally asked, "Can you still use it? That power?" Kelra looked away, her silver eyes dim, not like before. "It's arid, deep, weak. Sometimes it comes out without warning, like tonight. But it's nothing compared to what it was." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we'll bring it back," he said simply. She frowned. "Why?" "You don't even know me because the people hunting us do. And I'd rather they fear you than catch you." Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken about her gift as something worth saving. For years, she had believed the lies. That she was useless, broken beyond repair. But this human spoke as if she was something valuable. It was dangerous to hope, yet the thought clung to her. Outside the shelter, the wind carried faint sounds, a metallic hum, soft but growing. Kelra's head snapped up. "They're close," she said. Elias had already heard it, his hand tightening on the small tool at his belt. "They?" he asked. She nodded. "The hunters, the ones sent to bring me back." Elias's voice dropped. "Then we leave." Now, Kelra pushed herself up, wincing at the pull in her leg. The night was dark, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. They moved quickly, leaving the fire to die behind them. As they slipped into the shadows of the rocky path, Kelra's thoughts churned. Her past was no longer just a memory, it was catching up to her. And if Elias truly meant to help her, he would soon see the full danger of standing beside her. The wind carried the sound of engines now, closer, louder. Kelra's heart pounded. Somewhere inside her, the energy stirred again, faint but insistent for the first time in years. She didn't push it away, because this time she might need it to survive. The night air was cold and heavy. Elias and Kelra moved fast along the narrow path between jagged rocks. The faint hum of engines grew louder behind them, echoing in the canyon walls. Kelra's silver eyes darted toward the shadows above, scanning. "For movement, they're tracking us," she said, her voice tight. Elias kept his pace steady, his tone calm. "Then we'll make them work for it." She glanced at him sharply. "You don't understand. These hunters never give up. They'll follow us across planets if they have to." Elias didn't reply, his focus on finding a safe route. They reached a bend in the path where the ground sloped down toward a stretch of dry riverbed. Elias motioned for Kelra to follow him down the slope. Their boots and bare feet slid over loose gravel, sending tiny stones clattering into the sand. Darkness. A sudden flash lit the night. A red targeting beam swept across the rocks ahead. Kelra froze, her breath catching. "They've got scanners," she whispered. Elias grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, moving in quick, low steps toward a cluster of boulders. The hum of the engines was closer now, mixed with the clicking sound of mechanical limbs. From the darkness emerged 3 tall figures. There, armor black and gleaming, each carrying a long rifle with glowing edges. Their faces were hidden behind masks with a single red visor. One of them spoke in a metallic voice. Target confirmed disable and retrieve. Kelra's chest tightened, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her ears. Elias crouched behind the rocks with her, whispering, "They want you alive. That's an advantage." She stared at him in disbelief. "Alive doesn't mean safe." "I know," he said, "which is why we're not letting them take you." One of the hunters fired a round, a sizzling bolt of energy that struck the rock above their heads, showering them with dust. Elias pulled a small device from his belt, not a weapon, but a compact tool with a glowing blue edge. "What is that?" Kelra asked. "Something I built," he replied, flicking a switch. The device hummed, and a faint, shimmering field appeared around them. The next energy bolt hit the field and bounced off in a flash of sparks. The hunters paused for a moment, then split into 2 groups, trying to surround them. "They're coming from both sides," Kelra warned, her voice shaking. Elias scanned the area quickly, his eyes settling on a narrow gap between 2 cliffs. "Run," he said. Now, Kelra hesitated for only a second before following him, her limp slowing her steps. Behind them, the hunters moved faster, their metal footsteps pounding the ground as they neared the gap. One hunter leaped down in front of them, blocking their path. Kelra's eyes glowed faintly, her breath quickening. Elias stepped forward. Putting himself between her and the armored figure, the hunter raised its rifle. But Elias swung his tool, sending out a sharp burst of blue energy that cracked across the weapon. The rifle fizzled and went dead. Kelra stared, surprised, but the moment was short-lived. Another hunter closed in from behind. The gap was narrow, and there was no way to fight both at once. Something inside Kelra shifted, that faint energy stirring stronger now. Her silver eyes flared bright, and a pulse of force erupted from her hands. It slammed into the hunter at their back, throwing it into the canyon wall with a loud crash. Elias didn't waste a second, grabbing her arm and pulling her through the gap. The 2 remaining hunters shouted into their comms, the sound of more engines roaring in the distance. "They'll call reinforcements," Kelra said, breathing hard. Elias glanced at her glowing eyes and gave a quick, sharp smile. "Good. Let them see what they're chasing." They didn't stop moving until they reached a cluster of caves hidden behind thick brush. Elias guided her inside, setting a small light in the corner. Kelra's hands were still trembling, the aftershock of using her power leaving her drained. "You saw what I did," she said quietly. "I did," Elias replied. "And I think you're just getting started." Outside, in the darkness, red lights moved through the canyon like hunting predators. The hunters weren't giving up, but now they knew their broken target wasn't so broken after all, and that meant the chase had only just begun. The cave was cold and silent. Kelra sat against the wall, her silver eyes dim from exhaustion. Elias kept watch at the entrance, scanning the darkness beyond the brush. They had escaped the first wave of hunters. But she knew it wouldn't last. "We can't stay here long," she said softly. Elias nodded. "I know." They rested for only an hour before setting out again, moving along the shadowed edge of the canyon. The morning sky was pale, the air dry and sharp. They made good distance until a sudden noise split the silence, a sharp metallic click before either of them could react. A net of glowing wires shot out from the rocks. Wrapping around Elias, he fell hard. The wires crackling with electricity. Elias. Kelra cried, trying to reach him, but 3 armored hunters stepped out from hiding. Blocking her path, "Stand down," one of them ordered in its cold mechanical voice. Elias struggled against the net, gritting his teeth. "Run, Kelra!" He shouted, but she froze. Her instincts screamed to flee. Yet something inside her refused to leave him. One hunter slammed the butt of its weapon into Elias's ribs. Kelra's hands clenched into fists, her breath coming fast. She took a step forward. But the leader raised a weapon toward her. "Move, and the human dies," it said. The words cut through her like a blade. They dragged Elias to his knees, forcing him to look up. "Give yourself up," the leader demanded, "and he will live." Kelra's mind raced. If she went with them, she would be back in chains. Maybe worse. But if she didn't, she might watch the only person who had ever helped her die right here. Elias looked at her, his voice low but steady. "Don't do it, Kelra. They'll destroy you." Her chest ached, her silver eyes glowing faintly. One hunter pressed the weapon harder into Elias's side, the hum of its charge rising. She felt the energy inside her surge, stronger than ever before. The leader turned to her, its voice like metal grinding. "You're not worth dying for, girl. Broken things never are." Something in those words snapped inside Kelra. Her eyes blazed with light, her hair lifting slightly in the sudden pulse of air around her. The ground trembled as she stepped forward. A wave of force exploded from her hands, slamming into the hunters. 2 were thrown back into the canyon wall with a deafening crash. The leader tried to fire, but her second blast ripped the weapon from its grip and sent it spinning into the rocks. Elias dropped to the ground as the net's power flickered out. He coughed, forcing himself to his feet. Kelra stood in front of him now, her energy forming a shimmering shield between them and the hunters. The leader struggled to stand, its voice distorted. You're not broken." "No," Kelra said, her voice cold. "I was never broken. You were just afraid of me." She released one final pulse, the shockwave sending the last hunter tumbling into the canyon floor below. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of Elias catching his breath. He looked at her, his expression a mix of surprise and pride. "You could have run," he said quietly. "So could you," she replied, her voice still trembling from the rush of power. Elias gave a faint smile. "Guess we're both stubborn." She didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly, for the first time since she'd met him. She felt something more than fear. She felt like she had taken back a piece of herself. They moved quickly after that, leaving the canyon behind. Elias's injuries slowed them, but he didn't complain. Kelra kept glancing at him, her mind replaying the moment he told her not to give herself up. He hadn't seen her as a burden or a price. He'd seen her as worth fighting for. As the sun began to set, painting the horizon in deep gold, Elias said quietly, "They were wrong about you, Kelra. You're worth more than they could ever imagine." She didn't reply, but in her heart, the words stayed. For the first time in years, she believed them, even if only a little. The road ahead stretched into the fading light. Elias and Kelra walked side by side, their steps slow but steady. The battle in the canyon had left them both exhausted. Yet neither spoke of stopping. They knew the hunters would not return tonight. But they would not stop forever. The hills gave way to open plains dotted with patches of tall grass. The air felt cleaner here, the weight of the city and the canyon finally lifting from their shoulders. Kelra glanced at Elias, noticing the way he favored his left side when he walked. "You're hurt," she said softly. He shrugged. Been worse. You should rest," she insisted. He smiled faintly. "I'll rest when you're safe." As the last light faded, they spotted the faint glow of settlement lights on the horizon. Kelra slowed, uncertainty clouding her silver eyes. Is that a human place? She asked. Elias nodded. One of the colonies, good people, they'll help. Her voice dropped. And if they don't want me, they will, he said without hesitation, because I'll make sure of it when they reach the edge. Of the settlement, 2 guards stepped forward. They were human, armed, but relaxed. Elias greeted them quietly, explaining they needed shelter. The guards eyed Kelra for a moment, her thin frame, her alien features, her cautious stance, but they didn't turn her away. One of them said, "We've got room. Follow me inside." The settlement, small homes made of metal and stone-lined narrow walkways. Children ran between them, their laughter carrying in the cool night air. Kelra's gaze followed them, a strange ache filling her chest. It had been years since she'd seen anyone play without fear. Elias led her to a small cabin near the center. "It's not much," he said, "but it's warm and safe." When they stepped inside, Kelra froze. There was a soft bed, a small table, and shelves stocked with food. It felt unreal. She turned to Elias. "Why are you doing this?" He met her eyes, because everyone deserves a chance to live free, especially those who were told they didn't. She didn't know how to respond. Instead, she walked to the bed and sat down slowly, running her fingers over the blanket. The last time she had a bed, she had been a child. The memories came unbidden. Her home before the soldiers came, her parents' voices, the warmth of a family she had lost. Elias set down his bag and sat across from her. "What now?" she asked quietly. "That's up to you," he said. "You can stay here, or you can come with me. I move around a lot, help where I can." Her brow furrowed. "Why would you want me to come?" "'Cause you're not broken," he said. "And I think you have more to give than you know." His words settled in her like a spark in dry grass. She had spent so long believing she was worthless that the idea of having a choice felt almost dangerous. A tear in this small cabin. The danger felt different, not the threat of pain, but the risk of hope. Later that night, after Elias had gone to speak with the settlement leaders, Kelra stood outside under the stars. The wind was cool against her face, carrying scents of grass and cooking fires for the first time in years. The chains on her mind felt lighter. She whispered to herself, "They called me broken, but he saw me whole." When Elias returned, she met him at the door. "I'll stay," she said simply. "Here?" he asked. "For now," she replied. "But if you leave, I want to come with you." He gave a small nod. Then it settled. In the days that followed, Kelra began to heal. She learned the ways of the settlement, helped with small tasks, and even spoke to the children who were curious about her glowing eyes. Elias repaired equipment for the colonists, often with her at his side every time someone looked at her with kindness instead of disgust. The walls she had built around herself weakened. The hunters might still be out there, but she no longer feared them the way she once had, because now she was not alone, and if they came again, she knew she would stand and fight, not just for herself, but for the human who had given her back her worth. As the sun rose over the plains one morning, Elias and Kelra stood at the edge of the settlement, looking toward the distant hills. "What's out there?" she asked. "More than we can see," he replied. She smiled faintly, her silver eyes bright. "Then let's go find it."